Hey there, welcome to LSAT Demon Daily. I'm Ala. I'm joined by the wonderful Beth today, and we are both teachers at LSAT Demon, which you can find at lsatdemon.com. Today, we wanted to talk about a method of studying that I think, to be a little over dramatic, maybe has like literally changed our lives. Beth and I were study buddies way back when in the prehistoric times of just like last year, which feels so far away. It feels like a lifetime away. But we spent nearly every day for over 7 months studying for the LSAT. We did it with another study buddy. So there was three of us. And we wanted to share a little bit about what our experience was like, how you can benefit from a study buddy, how to find and maybe keep one going, and maybe some pitfalls to avoid. So let's kick things off, Beth. What do you think we solved by getting a study buddy when we first started?
I think two main key things to my LSAT studying, and I know from your LSAT studying too, and I think that would benefit other people as well, were accountability and consistency, both with a study buddy. I think the accountability piece, like I showed up for sessions and I wasn't going to get away with being like, I didn't miss a single question, even though on my own, at times I would be like, I'm mad I missed that. And maybe I'm going to treat it like, if I almost picked B, I would have been right and just get away with not doing a great review. I think that accountability with having somebody that would listen to and that we could talk about actual LSAT questions, and we would be able to call each other out and be like, you don't really understand like you understand that, or
Yeah.
you're doing a really big job right now trying to make a wrong answer right. So I think that accountability for our studying and having to actually understand it in front of a person was super key to getting better at the LSAT. And then second to that, like I mentioned, the consistency. I think this is a lot. This is heavily related to accountability. But having somebody there who is sort of relying on you for a super solid review kept me studying a lot of days. Again, with the frustration, I was one of those people that would be just annoyed if I got something wrong or got more questions wrong on an LR section or on an RC section. And maybe that would make me not want to study the next day. When I had Ala and our other study partner waiting on me and they were ready to show up, it made me want to show up and it encouraged me to do it too.
Yeah, that's awesome. I think that thing about like both accountability and consistency is like when you're having a bad day or like a non-motivated day, you can like lean on other people to like keep it going. And then when, I've definitely had days where like I just was not feeling it and I was like just sort of relying on the both of you to be like to be there to show up, and like that would like get me to drag my ass out of bed. And vice versa
Mhm.
too. I know like both of you guys have had bad days where I'm like, no, let's go, let's do it. Right. And that way, like not everyone has to be perfect all at once. We can like just like support each other together and we trade places.
Yeah, absolutely. Oh my gosh. I mean, and it was like, hey, I'm committed to this too, right? Like we want to show up to things that we commit for. I do think that it's helpful to treat the LSAT like a job in some ways, a job that's very, very part-time, 1 to 2 hours a
Yeah.
day, but you show up, right? And you do the
Yeah.
work. Yeah.
Yeah. It's a
Yeah.
commitment.
Yeah. What
Yeah.
else do you think were our needs and what we got out of it or we're looking for to get out of it?
Yeah, I think another thing that I was looking for was the isolation aspect of it. I think a lot of students relate with the idea that the LSAT can be really isolating, not just because it's a relatively niche career, like to go into law school, but also because people don't necessarily understand the weight that the LSAT has in admissions, and all of that combined just makes it kind of feel like people don't get it, right? And there's a difference between like, if I were to explain it to my partner or to my parents or something like that, they'd be like, yeah, yeah, yeah. No, I understand this is important to you. But that real understanding of like being in the trenches, like proverbial trenches with somebody where they are also suffering through the same thing, that was just really huge for me. And it really had an impact on my mental health because I was feeling really isolated. And given that I have to use my brain to answer LSAT questions, like it wasn't doing me any favor to continue to be isolated. So
Yeah.
isolation was like a huge aspect of it. The other aspect was that the LSAT is performance based, right? It's not like a cumulative exam you take at the end of a semester. it's something that you have to practice in your practice tests. And then you have to go do exactly what you've been doing in your practice tests on the official test. There is no difference. And given that it was performance based, like the personality honing that I had to do with study buddies, right? Like you were talking about it with consistency, where you had to like show up for someone, but it's like show up and be on call. Like you have to be present. You have to put yourself in a spot of vulnerability when you study with somebody. And because you're forced to do that in a much more friendly environment than like a section or even the official test, you are then actively growing your brain to understand the LSAT as like an intuitive thing, which is like obviously what we teach at the Demon, where like we want you to attack intuitively.
Yeah, absolutely. I think those two things are super related to isolation and the performance space. It's really, really natural for us as humans to every time we pop out a score to be like, that score is me.
Yeah.
That is my worth right there, right? And I think having community around it and even just having a study buddy being like, hey, I know you didn't get that question, but let's figure it out together. Let's do this together, and you can get it next time, is way more encouraging than what your brain might tell you, which is my entire worth is wrapped up in a number, which is not true of any of us.
That spiraling is like really hard to get out of when you're just by yourself.
Yeah, exactly. And like the frustration that I was talking about. And I hear that from people who study and come to classes at the Demon too all the time. Like, how do I get out of that? I do think study buddies and doing it in community is totally a way to help with that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, okay. So those are some things that we were like looking for. And maybe if we didn't have names for it at the time, those were, at least some of the things that in hindsight we're like, sure, we were looking for that. I think there were some surprising things we got out of it too, and maybe weren't looking for so much. Ala, what is a surprising thing that came out of the study?
I got friends through it. Beth has become a really wonderful friend of mine. And the fact that I like made like friendships through my LSAT journey has been really, really wonderful. Like just from like a personal level, but also from like a professional level. Like Beth's going to be a lawyer, an awesome lawyer, and I'm going to be a lawyer. And we like have connections now in what we're going to be doing. And this is also super true as a teacher now. It's like I've gotten to meet like wonderful, wonderful people at the Demon as teachers. And that's such a big, thing that I've like gotten out of this whole process of studying. And I know that like going out and trying to seek like community and relationships as you do something difficult is a really good way to make sure that you're successful. I'm a huge subscriber of like Leslie Knope's You Never Accomplish Anything by Yourself. And I truly believe that nobody gets anything done, especially anything done of like importance, all on their own. And that's sort of like the premise of getting a study buddy. What about you, Beth?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I couldn't agree more. And then on top of that too, I scored way higher on the LSAT than I ever planned to or expected. When we first started studying together, actually, Ala was like, "What are you looking to get?" And I think you have told me before, Ala, that I said something like, "I just want to reach the 160s."
Yeah, you did.
But it was like, as we were studying together and I saw Ala and our other study partner doing well, it was like, wait, I want to keep going too. It was like running a race or doing a sport or something with friends. It's like, I'm not going to be the only one who drops out now. Why do I need to settle for this?
Yeah. Exactly. I like remember your face and I like remember like what you said. You were like, I think just like maybe the high 150s, the low 160s, something like that. And then we all sort of like, and I think there's an element of this like feeling in all of us when we started. We were like, like we all like sold ourselves short for like how far we thought we could go. And then because we started like the momentum began and we were just like gaining speed, at the end we were like, we just stayed greedy. Right. Because I remember the score that you had before you finished and you were like, no, I can get a little bit better. And then you did.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. And that happened with both of us. Took it 4 times. Right. And it wasn't like I can't stop taking it because you are still taking it. It wasn't anything like that. It was just like, yeah, are we down to keep studying? We're down to keep studying. Let's do it. Let's meet again tomorrow. So there was like a lot of looseness to that, but also like the drive was there and we just kept each other going.
Yeah.
In addition to that too, and like along with friendship as well, we had like direct support and friends who were applying at the same time and in the
Yeah.
same cycle. We both have applied in this cycle. Don't have our official like announcements of where we're going yet because the cycle is not over. But it was super, super helpful to work on application materials together, to look at each other's stuff, to decide what schools to apply to, and
Yeah.
how many schools to apply to.
Yeah, it's just that
Yeah.
protection that comes from like multiple people researching like interesting things. Like the number of things I have learned on just perusing Reddit because there's people doing research and posting about it for like no reason. It's not like they're getting paid for it or anything. They're just posting because they're building community. They're trying to share information that you might benefit from. And I've learned so much. And as somebody that doesn't have any lawyers in their family, I'm like the first person in my family to go to law school or to go to like grad school in the United States in the same way. And all of that is like so hard to navigate when you don't have a support system. And it was wonderful to have like people there where I could like be like, hey, this application is saying this. Do I really have to do it? Like just getting that, like just being able to text someone immediately and get an answer.
Yeah. What else? What else do you think was surprising that we got out of it?
Yeah, for me, it was, I mean, I had some inkling of it that like I wanted to be able to like find a place where I could teach as like a learning device. And that's something that'll come up probably multiple times in this episode where you have to put yourself on the spot and make sure you can be thorough and clear as you're explaining why a question's asking what it's asking, what the answer is, why the wrong answer is wrong, right? All of those things boil down from taking the test as, okay, I have to be able to explain every single piece of this. But even though I had an inkling that I wanted to do that, I did not expect to get this job out of studying for the LSAT, right? Like Beth and I both finished studying, and then we both applied to be teachers at the Demon. And this job has been absolutely wonderful. I love my students. I love doing this work. And I know for a fact that I wouldn't be here if I hadn't like gotten greedy and that I didn't have like a study group to really like push myself forward.
Yeah, I mean, I couldn't agree more. And exactly like when we started studying together, we met through classes at the Demon. And it's not like we were like, one day we'll teach together at the Demon.
Right.
It just made sense because of how much we enjoyed what we did in our study buddy sessions for 6 months. And we were like, you know what? They are hiring.
Yeah, and it's really fun. Like because we were doing it from like a very community based, like let's see the best we can all do together. Because we were coming at it from that angle, that took a lot of the stress of the test away. Like I'm not saying it all went away. It was still nerve-wracking. It was still really anxious, but just having people there as support made it a lot less scary. And like, you know, at the Demon, we also talk about stuff like private tutoring, right? For instance, we talk about other ways that you can study. And I do think that there are benefits to private tutoring, particularly if you have like one area that you need to get better at, or you want like one-on-one criticism for like how you read, for instance, is something that I cover in my private tutoring sessions all the time. It's like we read together. But I do think if I really had to choose, I don't think it would be very difficult for me to say that study buddies are better than private tutoring, because it has a lot of the same elements as private tutoring, right? There's a community aspect. You're having a conversation. And if you can build it the right way, it can be much, much better than private tutoring. Also, because it's not that expensive or anywhere near as expensive. And it's that consistency, and it's that being with peers who are also struggling.
Absolutely. And just, it's the same thing too, that teaching, when you can explain something, that's when you know you really get it.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. We've talked a little bit about some things that we wanted and some things that we got that we didn't know we wanted, but we certainly did want.
Yeah.
How do you go about getting a study buddy though, if you do want one? Alla was the master here who invited me. Do you want to?
Let's get into our origin story a little bit, right? So I had worked with a different study buddy before I met with Beth. Like this was back in the years have blurred together. Between like 2020 and 2021, I had messaged someone through a live class and I started meeting with them. And they were a great study buddy. And they took the test and then they got what they wanted and they moved on. So obviously we stopped studying together. And then I was again back on the prowl for another study buddy. And then a couple things happened in my life. I had to take a break. But when I came back to it, I was back in live. And I was on, well, I think I was in Nathan's class. I'm pretty sure it was Nathan's class. And Beth and another student had like volunteered to say something or like volunteered to ask a question or answer a question. It's been a while, so like I can't remember exactly which one it was, but like y'all participated. And I saw your like cameras on and stuff. And I was like, you know what? These are going to become my people. So I just like adopted them into the group. I was like, hey, I just messaged them. I just DM'd them in class. The worst thing they could have said is no. And I was just like, hey, this is my score range. I'm looking for a study buddy to like meet up consistently. Are you interested? And they both said yes. And I think within a week, we were already like just going at it consistently.
Yeah, we were. And if that's from my perspective of the person who was messaged, I don't know if I've even ever told you this, Ala, but I do know that is exactly what happened, right? You DM'd me like right after I said something or volunteered. And I cannot express to you how much I felt like I just won the lottery. Like I felt like $1,000,000. I was like, wait, she likes me. Maybe I said something smart. She wants to study with me. I felt like so chosen. And obviously, if somebody does that to anybody who's listening and they can't do it, that's okay. Like if you don't say yes to the person inviting you, that's okay. But if you're wondering, like, should I message somebody? Me as the messagee, I was like so flattered. And I was like, this feels really special because somebody liked something about me, right? It was like a bid for attention. And I was like, oh my God, I'll take it. So,
that's so cute.
Yeah. I had kind of forgotten that because, it's been a while since I've thought about how that happened. But I mean, so if you're in the same boat wondering, how do I get a study buddy? Like, I do think a super solid way to do it would be to try even just a month of Demon Live. Go to classes. I think classes will help you anyways, but you will also see people in classes with their cameras on, or maybe if people can't have their cameras on, that should be a reason to exclude them. But people that are able, to go to classes, participate and stuff, maybe they're looking for study buddies too, or maybe they haven't even thought about it. Like I hadn't thought about it yet. You can just DM somebody a really low stakes question like, hey, would you want to meet up sometime and go over a couple questions? Is like, let's just try this out, see if it works one time. And then it also doesn't mean that you have to stay on live. Like you can bump down to premium or something after a couple months of live. I think we recommend that a lot. Which is what we did. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. We found our study buddy and then we like still were interested in like, getting some of those basics foundations. We always recommend students try live for a little bit if they can, if it's within their means, and then like go down to another subscription level. And then that's how we studied together. We bumped down and then we just like kept going at it within our study buddy. And there's other alternatives out there too, right? If you don't want to get a live subscription to find a study buddy or just to get the live subscription and go to classes. There's like Discords out there that are managed by students. There's like Reddit, Facebook, college groups. You can ask like a friend of a friend if they know anyone that's studying for the LSAT, right? You have to take some of that initiative and put yourself up for, to put it very, maybe that's a strong word for it, but you kind of get rejected sometimes, right? And like people say no, and you have to put yourself in that position where you're going to hear no, maybe a couple of times. I've been turned down a lot by a lot of different people for study buddies. And it's just part of the process, whether that's because of availability or just personality, for whatever reason. I've gotten no before, but that's fine. I just kept trying because it's not like a personal thing, right? They're not saying, they don't know me to say no to me. It just isn't fitting. And that's fine. And, at the Demon, we're always working on like community solutions too. So we're continuing to prioritize like connecting students, and we're going to keep working on that, and we'll keep you posted about that. But in general, live classes or just reaching out broadly in all the social networks you might have access to. If you're an introverted person, like seek out people that are more extroverted, that are like going to like connect you with other people. And that's just knowing yourself, right? That's just knowing that you're not somebody like me who will like message strangers in class. You're not like me. That's okay. And you shouldn't have any more trouble finding a study buddy because you're like that. It's just going to require a little bit of a different kind of work to get there.
Totally. Or you could be somebody like me and you didn't even know that maybe you needed a study buddy. So yeah, I mean,
Right.
I think as always too, like I'm thinking like maybe having a study buddy isn't for you too, but like you also don't know until you try. So give it a shot, see how it goes. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So
Yeah.
let's move on to like the kinds of things that actually worked with our study buddy group and how did we actually do the studying itself?
Hmm. Yes. So I think we started this way from the beginning. We would do one section. We would do one section independently. We wouldn't have to like sit on Zoom together or on FaceTime together and do the section, but we would pick a time and a date, and pick a time that we were gonna meet and talk about it. And we would do whatever section it was before. And we would typically do like one section a week, split out over 3 or 4 days, sometimes two sections a week, or sorry, test, one or two
Yeah.
tests a week.
Yeah.
But we would just do one section. And so we would come together and say we were meeting on Tuesday. We would do the section before Tuesday, say it's an LR section. We would review all of the questions that we missed. And the way that we would review those is that, like, if I came with getting question 16 wrong, I'm not looking at the answer to question 16 before we get together. I'm getting together and I'm going to do the question live in front of Ala and our other study buddy at the time and attempt it and try to figure out what I missed. And they would be there to almost be like my bowling lane bumpers. Hey, Beth, you're going
Yeah.
off track. Hey, Beth, that's not a conclusion. Or
Mm.
Ala would always ask me, what's your prediction? I was like the queen of not making a prediction for some time there at the beginning.
Yeah, I
But
remember
that's,
that. And you were so good at
yeah,
it when you started too. Once you started making predictions, I was like, wow, Beth became the queen of LR. Absolutely. I love her classes because she's just so ruthless in LR now. And it was so cool, like watching that shift happen. That's really funny.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it was exactly that though, that I just tried to get away with being like, I don't need to do it. I don't need to do it. Let me just move on. So that was how we did it though. We would go over the questions that we missed. And we also like, if we had anything that we were like, I know this gave us trouble, let's just go back because we're already together. Let's talk about it. And yeah, that was how we went over things. Is there more for how we went over things? I mean, we would do the same thing with other sections too.
Yeah, it's the same thing. I mean, we would talk about like we would just call out usually like 4 or 5 days of like a schedule, right? Like these are the sections we're doing. We might take a day off in between, something like that. And then I actually just realized something though about how we split it up as you were talking, because we only had to do the section without
Mhm.
reviewing. It made it way easier to do the section. I don't know if you felt that way, right? Because like when you're
Yeah.
doing a section, you have to like go immediately confront your like inadequacies and mistakes. And because
Yeah.
I knew that I was going to do that with a group of people, it felt a lot better to just be like, okay, all you have to do is take the section. We'll come, everything
Yes.
else will come. We just have to take the section. And then we
Yeah.
take it. And then when we'd show up to actually review together, it was like a live blind review that we would do. And forcing ourselves to reattempt the questions we missed was such a critical tool in finding our weaknesses, which then we like complemented with either live classes or with drilling, where we'd be like, okay, Allah's really bad at role questions. I don't know if you remember that. I was just like a travesty at role questions. And I just realized that that's something I truly, truly struggle with. And so I like focused on that like weakness, which we identified as a group. So it wasn't as threatening.
Yeah, absolutely. And oh my gosh, I remember so many times too, even if it was just like I did my LR section at 9 a.m. and then we met at 12 and it was just a few hours later, when I would be doing a question, I'd be like, well, it's clearly C. I don't really know what I missed there. And it's like, oh, you know what? We can all probably tell you moved too quickly. So cut that
Right.
shit out and don't do it again. And that was helpful too. And I think key to that and what we were doing when we were reviewing is it's like back to the accountability. We were
Mm-hmm.
honest about our mistakes. I would not have actually gotten better at the LSAT if I showed up to when we were gonna do our review session. And I said,
Right.
oh yeah, 16. I actually knew that and I could have gotten it right. And I don't want to talk about that question. Like there's
Yeah.
absolutely no reason. And as we've been talking about too, it's like there wasn't judgment coming from the people that I
Hmm.
was studying with, but there is a difference in, judgment and accountability.
Right.
We had committed to being honest with each other. We're going to be honest about our mistakes so we can actually help each other get better at this test.
Right. Exactly. I love that. I mean, the other side of that coin too, about like being like adults who are committed to doing the work of like being accountable, being honest and all of that too, is like we knew what not to do as well. We knew how to create a better space and we were deliberate about it. We communicated with each other about like our needs and our wants. And it like included stuff like not, taking up the space too much, making sure we traded off well, not like trying to be perfect in any of it, like in terms of meeting at that time or, studying a particular way. Like we let each other do what we needed to do, but we figured out how to grow together, like individually. A
Yeah.
couple of things helped with that. I think splitting up responsibilities was like kind of there. Not that there are a ton of responsibilities with the study
Yeah.
group, but I was like the one that was like calling out like the practice test that we were going to take, and I would just like schedule it, and I would like send it as like a reminder in the little group chat we had. And that was like really easy because then like I had been the one that had attempted like a bunch of practice tests by then too, because I'd already been studying for a long time. So it was easier for me to do that. And then it just made it so that Beth and the other study buddy we were working with just didn't have to worry about that. Right. And, they weren't annoying in the sense of like, they weren't like making me like pick certain practice tests or anything like that. And they gave me the grace of like being able to choose. And that like benefited all of us.
It was super helpful to me that you were doing that. And part of that was even because, like, one of the things that I needed with a study buddy and a schedule was flexibility. And that really showed up with how you were willing to be flexible with me and like pick a section, pick a time. Because I work full time and I worked full time last year when we were studying too. And it was incredible. Like, just, I mean, basic people skills, but like gassing you up anyways for it. Like you and our other study buddy were like so gracious if I ever needed to like move anything for a meeting. It was awesome. And also not having to think about like doing the scheduling or picking the practice test, just being like, it's been assigned to me. It was great.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, I think part of that working was just that there was like just three of us too, right? Like the three of us, we signed up for it, and the scheduling and rescheduling, like we did that, I think probably almost every time we met. We would push it like 15 minutes to an hour. Sometimes it just wouldn't work out that day. We'd have to do it in the evening or the next day. But the fact that we scheduled and then rescheduled was, I think, a saving grace for us because we kept moving it in the sense like things come up, things change, and that's fine. But it was a priority for us, and we would constantly reschedule it to make it fit, and so that we would like keep up our like streak of studying.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. And on that too, like that's kind of the honesty and accountability thing too. It wouldn't
Yeah.
make any sense if I showed up to one of our study sessions at 12 or whatever. And I was like, yeah, well, I actually didn't do the section. It made more sense to be honest, go, hey, I didn't have time to do it. Let's push back 3 hours or whatever.
Right. Right.
Because that wouldn't benefit you either, because then you don't get to study it. If I'm like, I just didn't do it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. Oh, that's a really great point, right? Like you being honest is actually helping me, even if it's like not like the greatest thing to like reschedule. But like we didn't sweat the small stuff. We really didn't.
Yeah.
We were
Yeah.
so fine with rescheduling as many times as needed because we'd almost like trade off like hot potato style who would reschedule.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
I know. And the nice thing about that too was like nobody was too like strict about it. So it made it exactly that we didn't have to sweat the small stuff. It was like, let's just keep on rolling, see what works.
Yeah.
So
exactly.
on that too, yeah, I mean, we did it for what, 6, 7 months together. We were study buddies. How do you think we kept it going, or what did we avoid in order to keep it going?
Yeah, so this is the pitfall section of this episode to like signpost for you guys. I think there was, I mean, I'll preface this with like, there was definitely a bit of significant luck involved. I super duper lucked out with Beth and the other study buddy that I ended up messaging. I don't know if there was like like, I don't know if God intervened for like a quick second, like while I was picking the people to message or what, but it really, really worked out for us in the sense that we were all people that were committed and people that were trying, right?
Mhm.
However, that did not happen in the other times that I like tried to attempt a study buddy. There were some that were a success, but there were others that definitely weren't. So we wanted to give you guys some like pitfalls to avoid. The first one is to keep it small. I think larger groups in general, if you go past like four people, you're going to have far more schedules to actually accommodate. You're going to have more needs. You're going to have like more conflicting things that need to get settled. I think three was super perfect for us because if one person for some reason had to like dip out, the other two people could still study. But it was still small enough that we didn't have to deal with too many conflicting schedules. And I think larger groups are messy for a lot of reasons. I think they're brave to try out, but then they can sort of become like a class situation. And we don't want that,
Mhm.
right? Like our classes go
Yeah.
anywhere from like 15 to like 50 people. And once you start getting them into like the tens and 15s in terms of number of people, it gets really messy.
Yeah. Also, like, imagine just doing an LR section and say you're doing an average of 5 questions wrong a test. Let's say me and Ala and two other study buddies are all getting 5 wrong, and we happen to get 5 different questions wrong. You've got
Yeah.
20 questions to review now.
Yeah.
Maybe there's
It's
some overlap, but that's just not efficient, right? Because you don't need to really review the entire section. You
yeah.
need to focus on your mistakes, and keeping it smaller will allow you to focus on your mistakes.
That's a fantastic point. Another one, and this is something that I don't think students think about a lot, which is don't discriminate by your score. And this is one thing I did deliberately because it was some advice that Nathan actually gave me, which was I looked for study buddies that were scoring lower than me. So I think when I messaged you, Beth, I was probably in the high 160s, like roughly around
Hmm.
then, is like
Yeah.
where I was when I messaged Beth and the other study buddy. And I was deliberately looking for people that were scoring a lot lower than me. The reason I did that is because I wanted to be in a position where like Beth would ask me a question and I have to go, shit, can I explain this or not? Right. And then very quickly, we all started essentially getting up to the same score range and we were very, very much like on par with each other. But don't discriminate by your score, right? Like if you're in the 140s, working with someone that's in the 170s, the 170s person is going to learn, you're going to learn. You don't need to worry
Hmm.
about the test range or the score that you're at, especially if you take the demon approach of like approaching it intuitively, taking it slow.
Yeah, absolutely. That was one of the things that when you asked me to be your study buddy, I was like, man, you must think I'm so smart, even though I'm still scoring here.
Yeah.
And on that too, and just more pitfalls, I think another one is that you don't know what you don't know. And so, very vague kind of, but Ala was scoring higher than I was when we first started. Yes. But I think it's fair to say you still didn't have the answer to every single question. Ala, back to the honesty, never just went, oh, okay, Beth, this is what a necessary assumption is, and gave me something totally incorrect. Ala, because she wanted to help me, and vice versa. We did this all along, just
Yeah.
like my little example. But she'd be like, I don't know. If I don't know the answer to this question, or if we did this for each other, we used outside resources. I don't
Yes.
think that you get into a study buddy group and you get to be totally isolated because you're
Yeah.
all studying still. We were studying still. It's still about learning. And if you use the demon, there are plenty of resources that you can use. I think like a really helpful order of operations can be text explanations, then video explanations. And then if it's still not clicking, a great time to use the ask button and ask specifically about your question. So with that too, like we would meet together, we would actually watch explanation videos while we were on FaceTime together if we just didn't
Yep.
get something. We even went so far as like writing an ask button question together if something wasn't addressed that we were wondering about. So I don't think you need to close the doors to other resources around you because you don't know what you don't know yet. And if you're still making mistakes on the LSAT at all, there's room for growth.
Yep, absolutely. And that's such a critical point because a study buddy system is not supposed to like put anyone in power or like put anyone as an authority figure in it, right? You're supposed to be doing it together. And when you struggle together, you go find some help together too, right? It's not about one person being right, or it's not about like trying to be right at all. It's about growing, and it's about learning what you need to change and fix. Another one of the pitfalls I think that students can get into is related to peer pressure. Luckily, this isn't something that really affected the three of us when we were studying, but I can see why peer pressure could be something that for us to bring about, in this episode, which is that, if you're feeling like you need to take the test at, let's say you're planning, like it's April now, and let's say you were planning on taking it in August because your sport trajectory is going in that general direction. That's what you're thinking about. But let's say your study buddies are like, no, you're ready now, go take it, right? You have to be able to put whatever you need first, right? That possibly means like ignoring me in class or ignoring any of us, right? Sometimes you know best, and that's what you should definitely follow. And I don't want anybody to go into a study buddy group and feel really overwhelmed by an environment that, isn't always going to be rainbows and unicorns. There are study buddy groups out there. There are situations you can get into that aren't going to be all great. And when that happens, you need to know sort of like how to navigate that situation to begin with. But that's just, what you do as an adult. But separately,
Yeah.
how do you choose yourself for your own LSAT journey, right? And I think Beth was really, really good at that. She was one of those people that like knew exactly what she wanted out of a situation or out of her study journey. And she was really great about like getting as much as possible out of the study group and being very strategically selfish in a fantastic way about what she needed and what she wanted and how she wanted to move forward. And that's something that I think we can all learn from, in the sense that like peer pressure is no good.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Thank you. And yeah, I couldn't agree more. I mean, you got to be the decide like on that too, like when to take a test and stuff. Like we never said, hey, are we signing up for this test? It was like, hey, are you signing up for this test? Obviously, I just repeated the same exact question, but oh no, I didn't. I said we and then you. It wasn't like I can't take the test unless you are, or you can't take the test unless I am. It was like, maybe we're taking the same official LSAT. And if not, I know that you're probably not taking the test because you're the boss of your own life and you know it's best for you.
Yep. And we would like routinely sign up for tests without telling anybody because we knew that that's what we needed to do. I think I took one of the tests before y'all did because I was in that score range. And I think the other study buddy we had didn't take a certain test that we both took, right? So that was just like super normal. And that would have been true even if like one of us decided to do something like retake and reapply, or like, stay another, like all that would have been respected because there's no argument to be had. You do what's best for you.
Exactly. Yeah. And I remember that first one that you were taking. I really wanted to take it because I was just like eager to take the test. And at that point in my study journey, I was also like eager to be done with the LSAT. But I eventually had to make the decision that like, just because I'm not ready doesn't mean all I can't be. And so it was like, okay, you fly. I will get the next one. Our last pitfall, and I think this is kind of a big one. Having a study buddy and studying with somebody is not going to automatically make you good at the LSAT. They are not sufficient, right? Nor are they even necessary. I think it's just like a take it if you want it kind of tool. But study buddies are not going to be your saving grace. As much as we found it helpful, we found it helpful because we were the ones who independently still had to do the work, show up consistently, be humble, be honest about our mistakes, and like just continue to be good humans to each other. So I don't think any of the learning that we did was by, osmosis. It wasn't because I just looked at you for a certain number of hours a week. It wasn't because you did well on LR. I had to do the work myself and you had to do the work yourself. Yeah.
Yeah. I think on that point about like study buddies not being your saving grace, and the reason we're bringing that up is because we're clearly advocating for study buddies, and we still are. It's just that I think there's a tendency to think that if you spend a certain time, like, or a certain consistent time with somebody, that you're like automatically going to learn. The reason we want to dissuade students from thinking that is because you have to take ownership for what you get out of this journey, right? We may
Hmm.
be doing it together, but we were responsible for ourselves at every stage. It was I statements like I, don't understand how this works. For instance, like I like sometimes would like struggle with like hybrid games, and games were a section that I think I was like still perfecting before like my final like fifth attempt of the test. And I had to take ownership of the fact that like I wasn't getting it. Like it wasn't done for me. And I think I ended up like adding on like, either games drilling every day or like a section every other day, something like that. And that was me tailoring what I needed to do for myself. And there's no amount of things that Beth or the other study buddy we had could say or not say to me that would change that, because I was taking ownership of what I needed to do. And every student, no matter whether you're in a study buddy, whether you're in live classes, this tends to be something that happens where like students come to a lot of classes, and we love having you guys. We adore you guys, but that's not a replacement for studying. I also say this
Hmm.
in private tutoring, right? Which tends to be, which is like one-on-one and tends to be very targeted work. I tell my students all the time, the hour we spend together means absolutely nothing if you don't go take what we're learning and implement it into your everyday practice, right? I'm
Hmm.
a tuning up machine for you, but you have to know those settings and go back into it when you actually practice. And that is such a big, such a big part of like study buddies helped us. It could honestly be a correlation causation thing in some way too. Like we just happened to
Yeah.
be in a study buddy group and we got better. We know that it was the study buddy group that like propelled us, but it was also that like very clear, honest, personal, individual accountability.
Yeah, that's interesting. We might be, yeah, correlating for causation. Maybe it was that we just put in the work. The study buddy was just like a guarantee that we would put in the time, right? So maybe it was just the
Yeah,
time and the
yeah.
work. Yeah.
And we're not trying to undersell like everything we've just said for like the last like 30, 40 minutes. That's not what we're trying to do. We're just trying to say that like there isn't a huge element of like the work we did on our own that made the study buddy part of it successful. And we fed off of each other, right? And each other meaning study buddies on one side and like our individual accountability on the other. So when the individual accountability was lacking, the study buddy would like boost it up, and vice versa. Like where we found the study buddy problem, we'd have to go fix it by ourselves. And it was that feedback loop that made it all work.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Like even just when you would always ask me, do you have a prediction? Like it doesn't make sense for me to just show up to our study buddy sessions and that being the only time to make a prediction. I had to actually start doing it independently too.
Right.
Yeah.
There you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I mean, I think if you are already in a study buddy kind of thing or you're looking for one, this is very similar to pitfalls. I think that we avoided, would never want to go here. I think we wanted to maybe touch on red flags too, very
Yeah.
similar to pitfalls, but actually maybe an actual it's time to dip out.
Yeah, exactly. So pitfalls we're thinking are things that you can like incorporate to make a study buddy group better, like things that you can collectively avoid as people that have bought into the process. Red flags are far more in the category of like, this is not working out, and how do you move on? And how do you evaluate the situation for like your own best interest? The first thing we'll just say is like, we're all adults, right? Like we're all people that have to navigate these situations. And there's a lot of it that just comes from being an adult and just evaluating it from that standpoint. And we won't like lecture you guys on any of that. We just want to like offer the kinds of like hints and tips that you could be thinking about that you may not be. And the first thing we want to talk about is just like this. This is very like, it's not a red flag in the sense that like there's something wrong here, but it's just like if the scheduling's not working out, you don't need to keep investing your time in it, right? If it's like for whatever reason, if it's just because someone's just not available all that much, or if your like time zones don't fit, all that, that's really straightforward. You don't have to keep trying to like stay up a lot later than you would or get up super early in the morning. Those kinds of things that have an impact on your studying and other areas of your life. You don't need to sacrifice it to that much. And there are other study buddies you could look for where that just isn't an issue.
Totally. I mean, on that too, like I think it's fair to say there's a difference between somebody who needs flexibility and somebody who's just flaky. Like
Yep.
Maybe they have some other stuff going on, but
Yeah.
you're the one who's like, look, you know what? I'm relying on you. I don't want you to flake out every single time we try to meet. And it might be time to be done with that.
Yeah.
Try it out with somebody else.
Yeah. I
Another one.
encountered, oh, sorry.
Yeah.
I encountered a couple of study buddies that were flaky and I had to be,
Yeah.
and I was very flexible myself, but I realized that the other person wasn't necessarily willing to be as flexible and were canceling a lot. And I had to be like, okay, this is not working. And that's, no offense to them. It's just isn't working.
Yeah, so many things in life that could apply
God.
to. Oh my gosh, I'll just leave that be. Your imaginations.
That's a spin-off podcast idea, Beth.
Exactly. Yeah. I think another big one is a potential like personality mismatch. I will be like first to say, I have a very strong personality. That means I'm not always everybody's cup of tea. I describe myself as often like speak before I think. And a lot of times that impulsivity like comes out more in my like day-to-day personal life. I can keep it on a little bit more as I just like continue to mature throughout my life and then like working and stuff. But personality mismatches though, like I have a strong personality. Maybe somebody does, or maybe somebody doesn't. I think it would be totally valid to just be like, look, you know what? I just, or maybe you don't even have to say why, a reason why, but if you just don't click with somebody, if your personalities just aren't great, conversation doesn't flow, maybe you get on FaceTime and it's like awkward. It's like sitting there pulling teeth. I don't think you should have an awkward time studying, or that it should be like pulling teeth. Then you're not going to look forward to any of your review or your studying. I think a personality mismatch is one of those things that like trust yourself, know yourself, go with your gut. If you just don't click with somebody, you don't have to. That's one thing that I tell my private tutoring students too. When we start, very first session, I'm always like, I will not be offended if you want to stop just because we just don't click. If we just don't click, I want what's best for you. And that might be working with somebody else. So I try to open that door. And I think like telling somebody that you're starting a study buddy journey with, like if you want to start it with telling them, let's be honest with each other. And if this doesn't work, let's just cut it.
Yeah, I like that. This brings up like a thorny question for me though. How do we walk away, Beth, when that comes up or any of the other red flags we're going to talk about come up, like when something isn't working out? Because that's probably something that keeps students from even trying to get into a study buddy group, right? It's like, how do I leave if I don't want to? Or like getting out of a situation like that. Do you have any advice on that?
I do, yeah. And one of the things that I have loved the most in learning about like healthy boundaries this year is that when you set boundaries, you don't have to tell the other person what your boundary is. It's personal, it's internal. So I think like how you walk away, like be kind to somebody. I use a little, I think it would be an acronym, right? Because it makes a sound. BIF is the acronym that I use with communication and boundaries with like my personal life, my professional life, all of that stuff. And it really helps me. But it's to be brief, informative, friendly, and firm. I think it can be super short and sweet. You will notice there, the word honesty isn't there. I think this is a part where if you need to cut ties with somebody because you have some sort of reason that any reason, I don't even care if I decide it's valid. I'm not even going to say valid reason. You get to decide whatever you want. I'm not going to say that you have to be the one telling somebody, I don't want to study with you because your personality is this, this, this. I think instead, being brief of, hey, I think we should go our separate ways. It was really nice working with you at the time. That's friendly, right? I think I would like to study independently for now.
Yeah.
That's friendly and informative. And you don't have to say anything like mean or rude. You actually don't even have to give everybody the full story.
I love that point about not having to be honest. That's so good, right? Because we are often like told that we have to give an explanation, like for when you say no to something, and it can just be no, like it doesn't need to be beyond that. And that's probably something that I feel like is just part of good, healthy communication in general. Like you don't need to explain yourself at all times. And weirdly, I'm sure we used like Biff as things like within our own study group, even when it was working, of just like, yeah, I can't make it to the study group. I'm busy, right? Busy is informative, but it may not be fully honest about like why you can't make it. And it just
Right.
protects you from having to like vomit everything that's inside your brain.
Exactly. And like if it became the kind of thing of like, yeah, I'm busy because I wanna go get dinner with some friends tonight. Like I don't need to be on the chopping block for that. Like I
No,
decided that was good
exactly.
for me. Like that was good for my health today.
Right.
Um, so I just think that can be a healthy tool, like you're saying, for any communication. But if you're
Yeah.
thinking about testing the waters of study buddy stuff, like that would be a good way to basically like break up with a study buddy. Just go your separate ways. Yeah.
Yeah. Exactly. I
Mhm.
mean, the other thing is that students might feel like, okay, if I go get a study buddy, this is like what we're going to try to develop, and this is going to be the study buddy that like, I take to my official test, right? You don't
Yeah.
need to feel that way, right? Like I went through like two, three, maybe four study buddies in my like Odyssey level studying that I did for like 2.5 years over a longer period of time for the LSAT. It was a really long journey for me, right? And I benefited from multiple study groups. And I also had to like, dip out of a couple that just weren't working. And that's part of the process, right? You meet some people, you help each other for a while, and then you go your separate ways, or you end up like me and Beth, like it worked out, and then we like took the official test, and that's how it ended for us with respect to the LSAT. But know that like it not working out, or it not working out for the full length of your studying, is going to be part of the process, and you have to like reevaluate and know that like doing your own thing is good, going to live classes is good, whatever mix of things that you need to do. And all of that should inform your study journey in general, because at the end of the day, and this is going to sound sad, but at the end of the day, you're doing the test by yourself. You're alone in the process of actually taking the test. And you can't rely on people at all times for it. And if you incorporate that into like your understanding of the test, then it won't feel as scary when it happens.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. I don't even think that's sad. It's just like, hey, you help me grow as far as we can, but we do
Yeah.
know at the end of the day, like, yeah, we're doing it alone. Yeah.
Yep.
So that's the part too that's like it's not osmosis. I can't actually, the most I can do is think about what Alla would say during my test, but she's not actually there. It's still
Yeah.
got to be like, what did I pick up? What am I carrying with me as I actually take my test? So with that, we are close to wrapping up here. I think in the future we have plans to do another podcast episode where Alla and I will do a live review of a couple of questions and kind of model how we did study together. And that'll be like, we'll come with some ones that we got wrong or maybe struggle with a little bit. And we will do the live like questions we would ask each other, like, hey, did you make that prediction? Or hey, why did you start with that rule if we're doing games? So there's a little plug for if you're looking for more on how do we actually do this, we will be doing a future podcast episode with how to review.
Yeah, exactly. We wanted to do that so that we could model that exact behavior and like just have a conversation about a couple of questions and show you guys how we did that, because we know it can be weird and awkward, right? Like to set these things up. We understand there's lots of trials and tribulations that come with this. We are empathetic to that. So we want to make this as easy for you guys as possible. The only thing, that I'll say before we close out is just a huge shout out to our third member in our triad of study buddies. She's phenomenal. We adore you. You know who you are. But yeah, thank you so much for listening. Over to you, Beth.
Yeah, of course. Cool. Well, yeah, thanks for doing this today, Alla. And to everybody else, we do sincerely hope it gave you a glimpse into what it could be like to dream about having a study buddy and how it might help you, and how to get creative with your studying, right? It doesn't always just have to be you at your computer. How can you find community or partners on your LSAT journey, no matter how long it takes you? So thank you for listening. You can find us in classes at the Demon at lsatdemon.com, or you can write into the podcast with any questions that you have for us. Thank you so much for listening today, and leave us a comment or write an email if you want to hear more or you have specific questions about this. Email daily@lsatdemon.com if you'd like to ask about this specifically or share some LSAT or law school admissions news. Thanks again for listening. Bye.
Thanks, everyone.